Hello there. I'm so happy you're here with me tonight. Insomnia keeping you company? Well, now you have me too. Let's make these sleepless hours meaningful with some hushed stories, authentic experiences from real people everywhere. If you find yourself drawn to these tales, please like, comment, and subscribe so we can meet again tomorrow night. Now, let me take you away with our first story. In 2008, television viewers across America were introduced to the Stockdale family through the reality show Wife Swap USA. The premise of the show was straightforward. Two families with contrasting lifestyles would exchange mothers for 2 weeks, offering both families a chance to experience a different way of living. The producers at ABC had been specifically searching for a bluegrass family band with strong, faith-based traditional values, and they found exactly what they were looking for in the Stockdales. The Stockdale household consisted of Mother Kathy, who was 44 at the time, Father Tim, aged 48, and their 4 sons: Calvin, who was 19, Charles, who was 16, Jacob, who was 15, and the youngest, James, who was 11 years old. Though Kathy and Tim had initially been reluctant to participate in the television program, their sons were eager for the experience, and eventually, the family decided to accept the producer's offer. Years before, Kathy and Tim had made the decision to move from the busy environment of the city to a quiet, rural area in Beach City, a small village located in Stark County, Ohio. There, they established their home on a farm on Dolphin Street in Bethlehem Township. Tim maintained a full-time job outside the home, leaving early each morning at 5:30 a.m., while Kathy stayed at the farm to homeschool their children. The Stockdales were a deeply religious family. Kathy often explained that they had chosen to move to the farm specifically to develop wholesome family values and to protect and shelter their sons from outside influences they considered harmful. Their lifestyle was structured around these principles, with clearly defined rules and expectations for everyone in the household. As part of the wife swap process, Kathy had to leave behind a detailed list of rules that would explain their family dynamics to the mother who would be temporarily taking her place. In this extensive document, she outlined that the children were not permitted to watch television, play video games, or listen to music unless it had been specifically approved by her and Tim. Dating was also prohibited for the boys. "I have never been on a date," 16-year-old Jacob had said during the filming of the show. "There's better ways to find out about girls than dating." The children were homeschooled by Kathy, who believed this allowed her to control their character development and education, keeping them away from any influences from other students or teachers that might contradict the family's values. The household ran on a precise schedule. Breakfast was served at the same time every day, and if the boys were not punctual, they would be given just 2 minutes to arrive at the table before being charged 25 cents for tardiness. The Stockdale home operated on a token system. To earn privileges, the boys needed to complete their assigned chores, receiving tokens that were tracked on a chart displayed on the wall. These tokens could then be exchanged for simple privileges, such as listening to a family-approved radio program. By all accounts, the family lived a rather secluded life, with their primary social interactions being with each other. "Life is not about entertainment and fun," Kathy had explained. "I do not promote a lot of leisure time for the boys. A lot of emphasis in the teen world is placed on hanging out with friends. We do not hang out. I insist that the boys have a focus and a purpose to any activity so that the boys do not become corrupted by meaningless relationships." Kathy acknowledged that she was raising her sons in a much stricter environment than the one in which she herself had been raised. However, she firmly believed this approach was necessary, given how society had changed over the years. The family's core belief was that spending time together, without external interference, was the most valuable thing they could do. Despite these restrictions, there was music in the Stockdale home, lots of it. The boys were all musically gifted and played together in a bluegrass band with their father, Tim. "Hello, everybody. How do you do? We're here to sing and play for you," was one of their cheerful introductions at performances. The band incorporated elements of gospel and country music as well, and they regularly competed in regional competitions and performed at bluegrass gatherings throughout their area. They were undeniably talented musicians, and the family expressed that they enjoyed every opportunity to play and create music together. Tim viewed the band as both an educational opportunity, teaching his children about teamwork, and also as a way for them to earn some money of their own. Kathy acted as the band's manager, and together, they produced 4 albums over the years. For the television show, the Stockdales were paired with the Tonkovich family, who lived with considerably fewer restrictions. When Lori Tonkovich came to stay with the Stockdale boys, she attempted to introduce them to more freedom, allowing them to experience things like television and video games. This approach was met with significant resistance, particularly from Jacob. When I switched the rules and I was going to let them have fun, let them have television and video games, and experience life a little bit, Lori later recalled. Jacob ran outside crying, and when I went out after him, I asked him what was wrong, and he said that his mom and dad would tell him he would burn in hell. After the wife swap experience concluded, life seemed to continue as usual for the Stockdale family. They maintained their musical performances, with the boys often winning competitions for their talents. They also carried on with their work on the family farm. As the years passed, some changes naturally occurred. Calvin and Charles, the 2 oldest sons, eventually moved away from home and the immediate area. Calvin began working at Hillsdale College in Michigan, while Charles was studying to become a doctor in Philadelphia. Though they had officially left the family band, they would still play music with the family whenever they returned home for visits. James, who was now 21, was studying business at university with hopes of eventually managing the business side of the family band. Kathy maintained an active presence on YouTube, where she regularly uploaded videos showcasing the boys performing and engaging in various activities. Her final upload was posted on March 23, 2017, featuring her youngest son James playing in the snow and making jokes. "Oh, hello everyone. I'd like to invite you to the 9th annual Stockdale Family Band Bluegrass and Gospel Show on April Fool's Day. You won't have to be the fool, though. We got that covered for you," James had said playfully in the video. By this time, the remaining members of the Stockdale band, Tim, Jacob, James, and family friend Joe Steiner, were still finding considerable success with their music. Their performance calendar was completely booked throughout the summer season. In the middle of June, they attended a musical gathering with other family members and friends. One witness later remembered that Jacob had left the event early, mentioning that he wasn't feeling well. On a seemingly ordinary day in June 2017, at 4:36 p.m., local police received a phone call. There was silence on the line, and whoever had placed the call quickly hung up. To this day, the identity of the caller remains unclear. When authorities arrived at the location from which the call had originated, residents in the area alerted them to gunshots they had heard near the Stockdale family farm. Neighbors reported hearing between 10 and 12 shots, sometime between 1 and 3 p.m. that afternoon. As police approached the property, they noticed the door was open, with a figure standing inside. Suddenly, they heard a single gunshot. Upon entering, they discovered 25-year-old Jacob Stockdale on the floor with a gunshot wound to his head. He was bleeding heavily, but was still alive. Upstairs in the bathroom, officers found 54-year-old Kathy. Near a doorway, they located 21-year-old James. Both Kathy and James had died from gunshot wounds inflicted by a 20-gauge shotgun, the same weapon that was found with Jacob. The evidence indicated that Jacob had taken the gun from within the home, shot his mother and brother, and then turned the weapon on himself. Tim, Calvin, and Charles were not at home when the tragedy occurred. In the aftermath, Calvin released a statement saying, "James, our youngest brother, has always been a catalyst of family fun. He leaves behind many friends and a family that loved him dearly. My brother Jacob is still in critical condition, and we are praying for his recovery as our family makes funeral plans and begins the healing process." Calvin also expressed that as a family, they loved Jacob and forgave him. Tim shared his own thoughts about his wife, saying, "Kathy has been my beloved wife of 32 years and a wonderful mother to our 4 sons. She loved nothing more than being a mother and grandmother. She had a strong sense of learning and was passionate about her Christian faith, natural health, and organic farming." The local sheriff's office provided details about their response to the scene. Late yesterday afternoon, at about 4:36 p.m., our office received a 911 call from the residents. It was a landline call, not a cell phone call. It was a hang-up call. At that time, after we received the hang-up call, which we do in a number of cases on a daily basis, we responded deputies to the residence. Upon arrival at the residence, the deputies noticed that the front door was open. They gave verbal commands. There was no response, and at that time, there was a gunshot that went off. The investigation into the tragedy revealed no prior incidents involving Jacob or any previous calls to the Stockdale residence. When asked about potential motives, investigators were cautious, noting that while there was some speculation, they were still working to determine what might have led to the shootings. Jacob remained in the hospital for over a year, undergoing numerous surgeries, including reconstructive procedures and extensive treatment for his severe brain injuries. He lost all sight in his left eye and was living with at least 7 metal fragments permanently lodged in his head. His recovery was long and challenging, with medical professionals working diligently to address both his physical injuries and psychological state. In September 2018, after more than a year of treatments and medical care, Jacob was formally charged with 2 counts of murder. He entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. A grand jury decided not to apply the death penalty in his case. Following a hearing in January 2019, Jacob's defense attorney requested a psychological evaluation of his client. As a result, Jacob was placed in Heartland Behavioral Health Care Hospital, a secure state psychiatric facility, because he was deemed not mentally competent to stand trial. Jacob underwent several assessments, but due to the brain damage he had sustained after attempting to take his own life, the results often varied. During his time at the psychiatric facility, he twice attempted to escape, first in November 2019 by hiding between book stacks, and a month later when he was caught trying to blend in with people walking out of the institution. A doctor who had been asked to evaluate Jacob expressed confidence that after a year of treatment at Heartland Healthcare, he should be competent to stand trial. However, the process of moving forward with the trial proved difficult for various reasons, including delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic and Jacob's complete silence during hearings. As the legal process continued, Jacob's behavior during hearings made it difficult to proceed. During one virtual court appearance, when asked if he could hear the judge, Jacob did not respond. The judge, Frank Forcione, expressed concern about Jacob's ability to participate in the proceedings. "Mr. Stockdale, I am Judge Frank Forcione. Are you able to hear me today?" the judge had asked. receiving no response. My first concern was whether they could hear, and the officer standing behind him can hear. "Mr. Stockdale, can you see your lawyers here today? Mr. Canis and Mr. Graham?" Again, Jacob did not respond, though he was seated and present for the hearing. The judge emphasized the importance of Jacob's participation. "The charges here are very serious, and as a judge, my job is to make sure that you get a fair trial, and that's my goal on every trial. But when we get to competency issues and evaluations for sanity, the only way we can proceed is if you participate." Dr. Wood was eventually sent to assess Jacob in person due to hospital policies and COVID-19 restrictions, though Jacob was still not participating or answering questions. After a lengthy assessment, Dr. Wood ultimately found him to have been clinically sane at the time of the murders. It's her opinion based on a reasonable psychological certainty that you are not suffering from a severe mental defect at this time of the charge, the court noted. She indicates it's her opinion beyond a reasonable psychological certainty that Mr. Stockdale was not suffering from a severe mental disease at the time charged, and an opinion regarding wrongfulness cannot be rendered because his defense is that he's asserting his innocence. As the May 2021 trial approached, Jacob's defense attorneys could no longer pursue the insanity plea they had originally put forward. Instead, they ultimately opted for a guilty plea in hopes of securing a reduced sentence. A week before the trial was due to commence, the now 27-year-old Jacob Stockdale appeared before Judge Frank Forcione and entered a plea of guilty to the murders of his mother Kathy and his younger brother James. The two firearm specifications in the case were dismissed. At the sentencing hearing, Jacob's family declined to speak personally, but they provided a prepared statement to the chief prosecutor. "Our family grieves the loss of Catherine Barbara Stockdale and James William Stockdale. Kathy was a loving mother, grandmother, daughter, sister, aunt, mentor, and friend to many. James was a loving son, brother, nephew, uncle, cousin, and friend to many. Kathy put all her efforts into homeschooling all four sons through their graduation from high school. Losing her encouraging words and comforting hugs has been devastating. James was a college student and dedicated musician, bringing smiles to all." The statement continued, acknowledging that while Jacob had no recollection of the events of that day, he trusted the legal system to do what was right. One of the Stockdale brothers added, "We love you and forgive you for the role that you had in their deaths. To the degree that we are capable of knowing the hearts of Mom and James, we are convinced that they also forgive you for taking their lives." The family expressed gratitude to the first responders who had helped save Jacob's life that afternoon, and they requested that the judge be lenient, giving Jacob the lightest sentence possible. His father, Tim, who had attended every single hearing, simply stated, "My sons and I continue to love Jacob." After considering all factors, Judge Forcione sentenced Jacob to 15 years for each murder, to run consecutively. "I have to protect the public," the judge explained, "and the nature of these charges are so gruesome, you will serve the next 30 years to life in prison." While the exact reasons behind the events of that June day remain unclear, many people, including Lori Tonkovich, who had swapped with Kathy on Wife Swap, believe that the strictness and pressures of the Stockdale household may have contributed to Jacob's actions. When asked about her reaction to the news of the tragedy, Lori shared, "I actually, when my son called me to tell me what had happened, he didn't know who the shooter was. I knew immediately. I knew in my heart that it was Jacob." She reflected on her experience with the family years earlier. He lived in a very controlled environment where his mom and dad taught him or told him what to do. Really wasn't allowed to do anything besides what they wanted. He got up, He worked, he worked, he worked. They're very religious, and they are a very, very talented family. But you know, God says gives you free will. Free will they didn't have. They weren't allowed to make choices. I just think that it caught up to them. That being said, what truly happened inside the Stockdale family home that day will never be fully known. The brief glimpse that viewers received of the Stockdale family life through a reality television show cannot provide a complete picture of their family dynamics. While there is considerable speculation and many theories about what led to this tragedy, the full truth remains elusive. What is certain is that this case represents a devastating ordeal for everyone involved. A family torn apart, lives lost, and many questions that may never find answers. Jacob continues to serve his sentence, carrying with him the consequences of actions that changed many lives forever on that quiet afternoon in June.
In the peaceful suburb of Chatswood, Australia, as the evening of April 27, 2010, settled over the community, residents were returning home from work, preparing for dinner, and easing into their nightly routines. The streets were calm and the neighborhood quiet, as was typical for this low-crime area where people felt safe and secure within their homes. It was around 6:30 in the evening when this tranquility was unexpectedly disturbed by the desperate screams of a woman's sounds that seemed so out of place in this serene environment. A couple walking their dog along Holland Street heard the commotion and went to investigate the source of distress. As they approached, they noticed a man wearing a green hooded jacket and carrying a backpack hurrying away from a house. They attempted to challenge him, but he quickly fled the scene, disappearing into the growing shadows of evening. When the couple moved closer to the house, they discovered a woman on the veranda who had suffered serious injuries. It was immediately apparent that nothing could be done to save her life. The woman was Michelle Beets, and she had been attacked on her own doorstep. Later, one of the witnesses, Gordon Bevan, would recall checking for her pulse and feeling the wound on her neck. In those final moments, Michelle had turned toward him as if trying to speak, made eye contact, and then passed away. Michelle Beets had just returned home from her workday at the Royal North Shore Hospital. Born in New Zealand, she had attended Epsom Girls Grammar School in Auckland and had previously worked in the heart department at Green Lane Hospital before relocating to Sydney. For the past 25 years, she had been dedicated to the emergency department at Royal North Shore Hospital, with her most recent decade spent as a nurse unit manager. Like many positions in healthcare, her role demanded long hours and presented considerable stress. Yet Michelle handled these challenges with remarkable composure. Those who knew her described Michelle as quiet and reserved in nature, though she was known for not tolerating nonsense. She had earned both popularity and respect among her colleagues. Her sudden and violent death left those who knew her struggling to make sense of such a tragedy. It seemed inconceivable that someone would want to harm her, especially in such a brutal manner. When police began examining the scene, they initially considered whether Michelle might have interrupted a burglary in progress. However, this theory was quickly dismissed as evidence emerged, suggesting a deliberate and planned attack. The electricity to her house had been intentionally cut off at a junction box located near the front door, disabling both the outdoor sensor light and the property's alarm systems. There were also indications that her shed door had been tampered with. The nature of Michelle's injuries revealed the violent intent behind the attack. She had suffered multiple stab wounds to her chest, head, and throat, and her throat had been cut, leaving her to bleed to death on her veranda. As investigators processed the crime scene, they noted more than 20 markers leading away from the property along the footpath toward Johnson Street, potentially indicating the path taken by her assailant as he fled. Michelle's day before the attack had followed her usual routine. She had gone to work and then stopped for groceries on her way back to the home she shared with her partner. David investigators quickly ruled out David's involvement in the crime. The community of Chatswood, accustomed to low crime rates and a sense of security, was understandably shaken by this violent event. For Michelle's colleagues at the hospital, the loss was devastating. New South Wales Health released a statement describing her as a valued and esteemed colleague, friend, and mentor, and an exemplary nurse. Dr. Robert Day, the deputy director of the emergency department where Michelle worked, expressed that the department had lost both a friend and a leader. As the investigation progressed, there was speculation that a patient with mental health issues might have been responsible, but police quickly dismissed this possibility. Superintendent Terrence Dalton clarified, "That is not correct. It's an ongoing homicide investigation. Police are looking into the victimology of the victim, which includes looking into her complete background, everything about her. A number of her work colleagues have been interviewed thus far. Statements have been taken. Her family have been spoken to, and the police will continue along those lines of inquiry." Authorities also addressed rumors that Michelle's partner David was in protective custody on the night of her death, confirming this was not the case. On the evening of her death, Michelle had planned to have dinner with David and an old friend named Franz, someone she had grown up with. Franz was visiting Australia for a dragon boat racing competition, and they had arranged to meet for a long overdue reunion. Following the tragic news, Franz canceled the dinner plans and returned to New Zealand, expressing his shock at what had happened to his friend. "The gruesome way she died is unbelievable," he shared. As investigators spoke with Michelle's colleagues, one name began to surface. Michelle had mentioned to people at the hospital that a man had been making her uncomfortable. 48-year-old Walter Marsh. Walter Marsh was a former U.S. Marine who had worked alongside Michelle at the Royal North Shore Hospital. He had arrived in Sydney in February of the previous year on a 12-month contract with the hospital. When questioned, Marsh claimed he could recall seeing Michelle a few times during his employment there, but denied any conflict between them. Further investigation revealed a different story. Marsh's 12-month contract had not been renewed in early 2010, and he held Michelle responsible for this outcome. He believed she had provided negative references that prevented him from securing further employment. Employment was crucial for Marsh's continued stay in Australia, as he was reluctant to return to the United States, where he faced significant child support obligations. This established a potential motive for Marsh to harbor resentment toward Michelle. Interestingly, just days after Michelle's murder, Walter Marsh returned to the hospital, not as staff, but as a patient. After suffering a seizure, the situation created the unusual circumstance where Michelle's colleagues were treating the man they knew was the primary suspect in her death, though his identity had not been publicly disclosed at that point. Despite his face being blurred in media coverage, Marsh continued to speak with reporters and maintained his innocence. "Did you kill Michelle Beets?" He was asked directly. "No," he replied. He claimed to have liked Michelle and enjoyed working with his colleagues. "I enjoyed the eclectic mix of personalities and thought. We all got along wonderfully," he stated. Marsh suggested he was being targeted because of his nationality insisting that police had prematurely concluded his involvement despite his innocence. "I'm not a killer, and I certainly would never harm a woman," he asserted. "The police think that just because I have a military background that I'm a killer, I'm not." He explained that Michelle had interviewed him over the phone when he was still in America for the position and had sponsored his visa. While acknowledging that his contract hadn't been renewed, he claimed this hadn't jeopardized his visa status and that he harbored no ill feelings toward Michelle. Investigators conducted a thorough search of Marsh's apartment over 3 days, hoping to uncover crucial evidence. When questioned about his whereabouts on the night of the murder, Marsh stated that he had met his wife at a nearby train station around 7 p.m. after she finished work, and they had returned home together. However, CCTV footage showed Marsh disposing of a backpack in a bin at a local shopping center. When confronted with this evidence, he dismissed its significance, saying, "I was always going to throw away that bag. It's no big deal." Police conducted extensive searches through tons of rubbish across various sites to locate the backpack, but were unsuccessful. Initially, there wasn't sufficient evidence to charge Marsh after 2 interviews, but the situation would soon change as the investigation continued. During his 3rd interview with police, Marsh maintained his innocence, expressing shock about Michelle's murder. When asked if he knew where she lived, he replied no. When questioned if he had tried to use a noose, he again answered no. When directly asked if he had murdered Michelle Beets, his response was a firm no. However, investigators also spoke with Marsh's wife, who provided critical testimony. She revealed that on the evening of the murder, just half an hour after it occurred, Marsh had told her, "I did it. It's done. The bitch is gone. No more bad references." She also disclosed that he had practiced throat-slitting techniques on her and his brother-in-law, techniques used by Marines for quick and quiet killing. With this new evidence, Walter Marsh was arrested at his Lane Cove apartment, and 3 weeks after Michelle's death, he was charged with her murder. Bail was denied. News of the charges brought some comfort to Michelle's family. Her brother Marty described it as fantastic news, adding, "Of course, we must now see justice do its course. We just have to let the police do what they do. Let the law do what it does." Michelle's father, Robbie, while relieved, expressed empathy for Marsh's family, saying, "I feel sorry for Mr. Marsh's wife and for his family in the U.S. I hope the trial will be speedy, correct, and come to a proper end." When formally charged, Marsh offered no reply, which the judge interpreted as a plea of not guilty, setting the stage for a trial. Medical assessments determined he had no substantial impairment or mental illness. While awaiting trial, Marsh attempted suicide in prison. He was found in his cell with cuts to his wrists and throat, along with a suicide note. After receiving medical treatment and recovering, he was returned to custody to face trial. During the trial, evidence revealed the extent of Marsh's planning. For weeks, he had stalked Michelle, observing her home to understand its security systems and layout. He had made numerous calls to her home phone from public payphones each day to determine her usual arrival time. Michelle had even spotted him on her street once, which explained why she had told colleagues he was really starting to freak her out. On the day of the murder, Michelle had altered her routine, slightly backing into her driveway instead of driving forward, which resulted in her coming face to face with Marsh, who had been waiting with a balaclava concealing his identity. He had prepared thoroughly, even having his knife sharpened beforehand. He had also asked his brother-in-law to accompany him to Michelle's house to keep watch, and had purchased secondhand clothes specifically to wear during the commission of the crime. Witnesses testified that Marsh had told Michelle he wouldn't hurt her if she stopped screaming, but then proceeded to cut her throat using the military technique he had learned and repeatedly stabbed her. The prosecution argued that Marsh had developed deep resentment and hatred toward Michelle, believing she had given him negative references that prevented him from finding employment. He had referred to her as a bitch multiple times and stated she needed to be gone. Michelle's partner, David Grant, attended the start of the trial, viewing it as an opportunity for justice. Investigators presented evidence that Marsh had cut the power to the house and broken a back door to create the appearance of a break-in. Carmel and Gordon Bevan, the couple who discovered Michelle's body, testified at the trial. They described hearing a woman scream, followed by a slapping sound. Mr. Bevan recounted checking for Michelle's pulse and feeling the wound in her neck, noting that she had turned toward him as if trying to speak before passing away after they made eye contact. The trial called upon 70 witnesses, with Marsh's wife, Samantha, and her brother serving as key witnesses. The jury learned that 3 weeks after the incident, Samantha had informed police of Marsh's confession. The defense highlighted that both Samantha and her brother had motivation to provide false testimony, as they had received protection from prosecution for concealing a serious offense. Additionally, Mrs. Marsh had been granted a visa to remain in Australia and financial assistance for accommodation. The court was shown security camera footage capturing a man walking around Chatswood in the hour following the murder. Detective Senior Constable Scott Bennett guided the jury through the footage, which began around 6:30 p.m. The individual was dressed in a white shirt with black bottoms, carrying both a bum bag and a plastic bag as he walked west on Victoria Avenue and entered the Chatswood Shopping Center. There, he used an accessible toilet and then the men's restroom before proceeding to the food court, where he disposed of items in rubbish bins. Bennett noted that while Marsh had significantly changed his appearance since his arrest, he believed the man in the footage was indeed Marsh. The defense contested this identification, suggesting the figure in the video might not be their client. "The place is well lit, with people around," argued Marsh's lawyer, "and whoever committed that murder would have been covered in blood." Further testimony revealed unusual statements made by Marsh to his wife Samantha. Reported that approximately a month before the murder, Marsh had claimed, "Finally, I got permission from the organization in Ireland to kill Michelle Beets." She also testified that about a week prior to Michelle's death, her husband had purchased an unusual set of clothes shoes and rubber gloves. She recalled seeing him wear the outfit once, but never saw those items again afterward. Additionally, Mrs. Marsh stated that on April 27th of the previous year, her husband had told her he had changed clothes in a nearby garage and then disposed of his old clothes, the gloves, and the knife. The court also heard that in the weeks preceding Michelle's murder, Marsh had planned another crime: the murder of his ex-wife in the United States. The prosecutor explained that Marsh had traveled back to America, intending to murder his first wife due to an unpaid child support bill of $50,000. Although he ultimately did not carry out this plan, the prosecutor noted, "It shows some degree of pre-planning. He thought he would solve the problem by murdering his ex-wife. Then it turned to murdering Michelle Beets." In November, the jury reached their verdict: guilty. When the guilty verdict was announced, applause erupted from the public gallery as family and friends of Michelle expressed their relief at the outcome. Marsh's reaction was described as unusual. He smiled, laughed, joked with his lawyer, and appeared relaxed as he was led away. He even made a tutting motion toward the victim's friends and family. David Grant, Michelle's partner, expressed his relief. "I'm personally very relieved at the result today. It's been a long, hard 18 months for myself, Michelle's family, and friends." Others added, "We just want you to know what a beautiful, wonderful person she was, and she is so sadly, sadly missed." Justice Derek Price determined that the maximum penalty was appropriate for what he termed a barbaric crime. The level of the offender's culpability in the commission of the offense is so extreme that the community interest in retribution punishment, community protection, and deterrence can only be met by a sentence of life imprisonment, he stated. The judge noted that Marsh had told his wife he intended to confront Michelle by pretending to distribute Mormon books while wearing a Mormon uniform to frighten her. But this intention had evolved into an intent to kill. The manner in which he killed her was cruel, merciless, and abhorrent. The offender's crime falls within the worst category of murder. David Grant responded to the sentencing by saying, "I'm just happy that he's off the streets, and can't cause any more harm to anyone else. I agree with Justice Price that it certainly was in the worst category." During the sentencing, Marsh appeared disengaged from the proceedings. He ignored the judge's request to stand for his final sentence and had to be prompted by his lawyer. While Marsh retained the right to appeal against the severity of his sentence, David Grant expressed hope that the judgment would prevent any such challenge from succeeding. The conviction represented not just a victory for Michelle's family, but also for the police, who had worked diligently to bring Marsh to justice. Although nothing could bring Michelle back. Knowing that her killer would spend the remainder of his life in prison offered some measure of solace. During the investigation, journalist Clementine Cuneo had developed what she described as an uncomfortable bond with Marsh. They had spoken frequently by phone, as he repeatedly denied involvement in the murder. However, during one Tuesday call, while Cuneo was at a hairdresser, Marsh indicated he needed to share something not particularly good. After speaking incoherently for several minutes, he said, "I needed the money." When Cuneo realized the implications and asked directly what he meant, Marsh replied, "I had to do it. I had to do it for the money." Recognizing she was hearing a confession, Cuneo advised him to contact police. Marsh continued, "I have cancer, so I'm going to die anyway. My wife wants to go back to Vietnam to start a business. The money is for her. It was a contract killing." Uncomfortable with the conversation, Cuneo ended the call and contacted police. That night, she received 2 more calls from Marsh urging a meeting. She briefly visited his home the following morning with a photographer, unaware that police were already interviewing Marsh's wife and brother-in-law. Their testimony, combined with Marsh's call to Cuneo, provided sufficient evidence for his arrest and murder charge. 4 years after his conviction, Marsh appealed his sentence, seeking a reduction to a minimum term of 24 years. His legal team argued that evidence regarding his Marine Corps knife training should have been inadmissible at trial, stating there are no striking similarities between the method Marsh was allegedly taught to inflict and the wounds inflicted upon the deceased. They also contended that the life sentence was manifestly excessive, noting the absence of torture before the murder, no sexual motive, no multiple victims, and Marsh's previously clean criminal record. Justice Harrison rejected these arguments observing that the murder demonstrated a high level of planning and was clearly a sustained and merciless attack upon an innocent and defenseless victim. These matters combined to raise the awful specter of future dangerousness to the community. The appeal was denied, and the original sentence remained in place. Outside court, David expressed relief at the outcome. In April 2020, Walter Marsh was found dead in his cell at Lithgow Correctional Center at the age of 59. Initially, no cause of death was provided, but it was later reported that he had taken his own life. Michelle Beats's funeral had drawn more than 1,000 attendees, illustrating the significant impact she had made in her community. Following her death, the Michelle Beats Award for Inspirational Pediatric Care was established to recognize individuals who exceed expectations in advancing children's health in New South Wales. The award's creation acknowledged that Michelle was deeply committed to nursing practice education and demonstrated the highest standard of nursing professionalism, investing in the best level of care for all patients. Recipients of the Michelle Beats Award received $25,000 worth of medical equipment for their hospital through the Humpty Dumpty Foundation, along with a $5,000 bursary for professional development training or research. Though her life ended tragically, Michelle's legacy continues to endure, not only through the award bearing her name, but through the countless lives she touched during her years in healthcare. Every patient she cared for, every colleague she supported, and every act of kindness she showed. While justice brought a measure of peace, it is her compassion, dedication, and humanity that truly continue to resonate within the community she serves so faithfully. In the early hours of March 28, 2014, Brisbane, Australia was recovering from a recent storm. The heavy rainfall had left Kurilpa Park unusually quiet. This park, normally filled with joggers and people walking their dogs, was nearly empty as the day began. That morning, a person noticed someone who appeared to be sleeping on a bench under a rotunda by the Brisbane River. The area was located between the Go-Between Bridge and the William Jolly Bridge. Initially believing this was someone experiencing homelessness, several passers-by continued on their way without stopping. Eventually, someone decided to check on the person. They gently removed the newspaper and jacket covering the individual and made a distressing discovery. A young woman was found unclothed, severely injured. She was unresponsive, showing no pulse and not breathing. Despite efforts to revive her, she had already passed away. Emergency services arrived at the scene shortly after, and a murder investigation commenced. Though, at this point, authorities did not know the identity of the woman. Police officers had an intuition about where they might begin their inquiries. They proceeded to the Ozcare Homeless Hostel, which was located not far from the park. Ozcare maintained a 9 p.m. curfew, and residents who did not comply with the rules would typically be asked to leave. Law enforcement needed to verify if all residents were present and accounted for. During their check, they discovered one resident had not returned for several nights. This person had left all of their belongings at the hostel. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in France, a man was browsing through social media when he noticed a post that immediately caught his attention. Police in Brisbane had shared images of jewelry belonging to a young woman they were attempting to identify. She had been found deceased in a local park. The man recognized the jewelry instantly and contacted authorities. He knew it belonged to his girlfriend, 21-year-old Sophie Colombet. Police subsequently confirmed that the woman found was indeed a French exchange student who had been residing in Brisbane for approximately 1 year. This identification came after receiving calls from both Sophie's boyfriend and a friend who had reported her missing. Sophie had traveled from France to study at Griffith University, arriving in Australia the previous February on a student visa. She was described as an adventurous person who excelled in many areas and embraced challenges. Her brother Guillaume noted that she was very curious and enjoyed traveling. She had formed friendships in many places. Like many who move far from home, Sophie experienced homesickness and missed her family, her homeland, and her boyfriend Boris. Boris had previously been in Australia with Sophie, but when his visa expired and he had to return to France, Sophie decided she would eventually follow. She had been working diligently to save money for a trip back home, taking on various jobs, including door-to-door sales and teaching French. Her plan was to return to France in June. Sophie maintained regular contact with her family. On March 16th, she sent an email to her mother, ending it affectionately with kisses. This would be the final communication her mother would receive from her. On March 27th, Sophie was walking home from an evening class at Griffith University. After classes concluded around 8:30 p.m., she prepared to head home. A classmate offered her a ride, but she declined and instead took a bus with a friend to the Cultural Center terminal. This friend would be the last person to see Sophie alive. After disembarking from the bus and walking away from her stop, holding her umbrella and bag, Sophie made her way toward her apartment on Key Street. Following a path along the Brisbane River, she was captured on CCTV just before 9 p.m. at the Kurilpa Bridge. What happened after that point remained unclear initially. The post-mortem examination revealed the extent of Sophie's injuries. She had sustained black eyes, bruises across her elbows, hands and feet, bruising on her spine, and small puncture marks on her lower body and feet. The cause of death was determined to be significant. Head injuries, including hemorrhage and skull fractures. In total, she had 128 external injuries. A particularly poignant detail emerged when people had walked past Sophie as she lay exposed in the cold, covered only by newspapers and a jacket. She was still alive. She had survived for several hours after the attack. Detective Inspector Rod Kemp expressed his dismay to reporters, saying, "It's disgusting. You look at car accidents, and they're bad enough and sudden. But for someone to be brutally attacked in this manner, it's just disgraceful." In the days that followed, police released security footage showing Sophie in her final moments. It had been nearly a week since the business student was found deceased beside the river in South Brisbane. Police announced increased patrols of the area overnight as they intensified their search for the person responsible. Police divers located Sophie's umbrella in the Brisbane River. They continued searching for her clothing boots, handbag, and possibly her smartphone and tablet. Regarding the motive, authorities indicated that there was no evidence suggesting the perpetrator was known to Sophie, and they were treating it as an opportunistic attack. Detective Kemp noted, "I don't think there's anything to suggest you could put a tag of a foreign student on. I think she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time." Foot patrols were increased around the park, and officers interviewed people walking in the area, hoping to discover new leads. News of Sophie's death made headlines in her hometown in northern France, with overseas reports describing her death as mysterious. In Brisbane University, students began planning a vigil. During a meeting with the French ambassador, the premier offered condolences and assistance to Sophie's family, who were arranging for her return to France. The investigation into Sophie's murder was extensive, involving more than 60 police officers. They were unable to locate her clothing, had no weapon, and initially no suspects. Many Brisbane residents were shocked, and those who had known Sophie were devastated. Her roommate described her as a kind, gentle, quiet person, wondering who would want to harm her. In the aftermath of Sophie's death, a makeshift memorial formed in the park where she was found. People left flowers and tributes to honor her memory. One note read, "I did not know you, Sophie, but I had to be here just to show you how much I care." Another stated, "Angel, I never knew you, but I will never forget you. R.I.P. beautiful girl. Safe streets for Sophie." There was understandable concern among the community. Sophie was the 4th international student to be killed in that area. Recently, though, police clarified that the murders were not connected. Queensland State Premier Campbell Newman reassured visitors that those coming from overseas were safe, saying, "I believe it is safe not only for international students, but for Brisbane students." The investigation continued, with officers collecting evidence from the scene and reviewing more CCTV footage from that evening. The footage revealed a significant lead. The same resident who had been unaccounted for at the hostel was captured on camera in the same area as Sophie that night. This person was identified as Benjamin James Millward. Benjamin had a criminal record that included burglary and violent offenses, though no sexual offenses. He had been released from prison in December 2012 for assault, was subsequently recalled after violating his parole, and had been released the previous July. His record also included drug offenses causing public nuisance and robbery. On a social media page called Probation Sucks, he had written, "Probation is easy, jail and parole suck. You have it easy on probation." As part of their ongoing investigation, detectives identified Benjamin as a person of interest. They described him as 25 years old, 180 centimeters tall with proportionate build, a dragon tattoo on the left side of his chest, short fair hair, and hazel eyes. Police cautioned the public not to approach him, stating that they were not certain of his involvement at that stage, but wished to speak with him. Patrols were increased, and local residents and businesses were shown photographs of Benjamin in hopes that someone might have seen him. CCTV footage showed him boarding a train at South Brisbane Station at 11:23 p.m. That night, the train terminated at Bowen Hill Station, where he was again captured on camera. He appeared unsettled and headed toward Abbotsford Road. Authorities believed he may have slept near the airport before taking the airport train to Varsity Lakes. It was thought that he then walked and hitchhiked to Ballina. His cousin posted on social media, urging him to come forward and speak with police. "If anyone has seen my beloved cousin Benny, please contact the police. Love you, Benny. Everything's going to be okay." His brother Josh also encouraged him to come forward and clear his name, as did his mother Diane, who wrote, "We love you, Ben. Please come home. Why don't you call us to sort it all out? It's for Sophie's family. They need to know." She added that she did not believe he was guilty of what he was being accused of. Sophie's family expressed appreciation for the support they had received. Guillaume noted that the French embassy, the police, the Brisbane Town Hall, and the community in Australia had done everything possible to help. He mentioned a website created in Australia where people posted messages that were translated into French, and French residents in Australia offered support. A nationwide search was underway, leaving no avenue unexplored. On April 7th, a significant development occurred when a hostel in Ballina contacted police to inform them that Benjamin had stayed there a few nights earlier. Investigators discovered he had registered with a job agency in Coffs Harbour, New South Wales. Officers were dispatched, and less than 2 weeks after Sophie's murder, Benjamin Millward was taken into custody. He stated that he could only remember portions of what had happened, but told police during his arrest, "What I've done is just horrible. I didn't intend for nothing to happen." He also informed police that he considered himself a bit of a sex addict. Benjamin was extradited back to Queensland to face charges there. The community's reaction to Sophie's death transformed into action, with more than 2,000 people marching through Brisbane and holding a candlelight vigil in her memory. The president of the Postgraduate Student Association at Griffith University addressed those gathered, recalling Sophie's laughter and joy. 6 months later, and the laughter has gone. We all know the drill when it comes to personal safety, but something like this you simply can't prepare for. We owe it to Sophie to ensure that Brisbane is a city which is not only safe in the brochure, but in real life. Those in attendance followed a group of pipers into Kurilpa Park, where candles were lit. The vigil's organizer noted that the large turnout demonstrated Brisbane's concern about violence against women, stating, "Violence against women is happening and it's not okay. It's so important to do this to also provide comfort to her family, who are thousands of miles away on the other side of the world." One attendee observed, "She's everybody's daughter, and she's everybody's sister." Eventually, Sophie's remains were returned to France for her funeral. In her hometown, more than 200 people gathered. Her parents, Guillaume and Corinne, along with her brothers. Lionel and Guillaume led a procession of 50 of Sophie's closest friends and family, including her boyfriend Boris. Each carried long-stemmed carnations. The sound of crying could be heard as the procession moved forward. Members of the musical club, where Sophie had played lead flute, provided music, supporting each other through their grief by saying they were doing it for Sophie. 8 books of condolences were placed next to a photograph of Sophie, embracing a koala at the Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary in Brisbane. Benjamin Millward was charged with deprivation of liberty, armed robbery, rape, and murder. During his committal hearing, evidence and witness testimonies helped establish a timeline of events. He told police he had limited memory of the incident due to the drugs he had consumed that evening, but did recall assaulting her. He stated he did not have a weapon, but remembered striking her. On that day, he had injected crystal methamphetamine and consumed large quantities of wine beer and bourbon. A fellow resident of Ozcare named Justin had provided the drugs to Benjamin, and the two met again that evening by the Riverside Rotunda, where they took more substances. One witness who had used drugs with Benjamin that day commented that it did not impact memory. "I can still recall what I'm doing. It doesn't so much affect your memory, but your stamina. You're fully aware of what you can and can't do." This person added that the amount of drugs taken that day was fairly bad. Sophie had walked toward the rotunda just before 9 p.m. As she was making her way home, Benjamin attacked her, assaulted her, and beat her as she fought for her life. He told her he would seek help but did not follow through. Instead, he disposed of her belongings in the river and fled. He stated that he panicked, purchased a train ticket to Ipswich, and left her to die. However, he did not board the train, choosing instead to travel to Coffs Harbour in New South Wales. A forensic scientist testified that DNA had been collected from beneath Sophie's fingernails. This DNA was 1,000,000 times more likely to have come from Benjamin than from someone else. The evidence was compelling. Following the committal proceedings, it was a matter of waiting for the trial. However, before it was scheduled to begin, Benjamin pleaded guilty to raping and murdering Sophie. His defense lawyer stated that Benjamin was remorseful for his actions and had written an apology letter to Sophie's family. He could be seen becoming emotional as he sat in the dock with his head lowered. Sophie's family traveled to Australia for the sentencing, where they wept in court as victim impact statements were read. The family had journeyed across the world for the proceedings, but as was noted, it was a different world from the one they once knew. Upon learning of Sophie's death, their world had collapsed around them and had never been the same. Sophie's boyfriend Boris, who had left Australia just 6 weeks before her death, had been taking sleep medication and sedatives to cope with his grief. Benjamin Millward was sentenced to life imprisonment for murder with a minimum non-parole period of 20 years and 15 years for rape to be served concurrently. Supreme Court Justice Anne Lyons delivered the sentencing remarks, which were filmed for the first time in Queensland history. She stated, "She died not far from this courthouse. I can see the spot from my room. This young woman died at your hands. You have caused her death. It is so hard to understand how you could have acted in that way. The sentence I'm about to impose denounces publicly your conduct and communicates to you society's absolute condemnation of your conduct. You attacked a defenseless woman. You showed her no respect. You attacked her inherent dignity as a person. You attacked her dignity as a woman. You treated her appallingly and then left her. You walked away. I understand the term in French is recluse young criminal, a perpetuity. In either language, the meaning is clear. You will forever be serving a sentence of life imprisonment. To ensure Sophie would not be forgotten, a memorial stone was created for her. It depicted mountains and a butterfly. The mountains were visible from her home in France. Her brother Guillaume shared that he had requested the butterfly be added because several days after her death, he saw one nearby and asked it for comfort. The butterfly then flew over, landed on his hand, and remained there for several minutes. Australia has witnessed similar cases before cases of women like Jill Meagher and Eurydice Dixon, who were simply walking home. What stands out in these instances is how Australia responds to such tragedies, with people taking to the streets, showing solidarity and expressing compassion for those they never met. This was equally true in Sophie's case. The knowledge that Sophie survived for hours after the attack, while people walked past her without realizing the severity of her condition, is profoundly saddening for everyone involved. By all accounts, Sophie was a remarkable young woman who embraced challenges large and small, always ready to welcome whatever life presented. As her family said of her, "Your life has only ever been about kindness, overflowing energy and happiness, and a simple smile that never disappeared from your face. Sophie, may you be our daughter, our sister, our love, and our friend. You will appear in every wink in every little flower and every sunrise of the day.